friendship that'll never ever end.
Run!
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Reaction Beanie Yo 712. Talking that neighborhood, my brothers and sisters. It is that time to get into another one of these true crime, horror, dark, deep, and mysterious, what the is going on type of videos. And today, we are going back to Mike from That Chapter. That Chapter Wednesdays, Bean Team. Hope y'all doing excellente out there today. And I'm glad that you came on back to the channel once again. Self with the Bean. And the title of the video is Traffic Stop Accidentally Reveals Horrifying Secret Murder Cult. Sound like we in for another one of these crazy cult stories, Bean Team. And you know what's worse than a freaking cult? You know what's more dangerous than a cult? A freaking cult that kill people. Long story short, short story long, Bean Team. And I'm ready to get into it. But before we get into it, y'all know what y'all got to do. Get whatever you may need. Get what you need, please. It is always a delight when we get to go back to Mike. Y'all got what y'all need, y'all ready to go? Then let's go.
Is actually tied to a series of murders across the country.
Call themselves the Zizians.
Group known as the Zizians that some have described as a possible cult.
That deadly shooting could be the latest in a spree of other killings around the country.
We're still working to figure out the motives of this fringe group, the Zizians.
May have joined a group with potentially alarming backstories and possible connections to killings in California, Pennsylvania, and now Vermont.
Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video we are going to take a look at what is quite possibly the strangest case that is still ongoing, and it is about this group, right, called the Zizians, who are linked to a series of horrifying events all across the USA. There's a lot of adjectives being used to describe this group. You got genius, trans, vegan, although the most common one you'll see used is death cult. The amount of crazy in this story would jam a wood chipper. But before we get into all of that, please subscribe to see new stories for the dark every single Tuesday. Now, you and I, let's give it a go.
Let's give it a go. And get whatever you may need. And just the first shocking thing, y'all, before we even start, is just the fact that they doing this all over the United States. You know what I'm saying? From the east to the west coast with they freaking killings. I'm thinking it was just gonna be in one city. No, they were not worldwide, but United States wide with it. Let's go.
It was a Monday in mid-January 2025. Vermont, less than 10 miles from the Canadian border. The weather was bitterly cold, your hands couldn't feel your face and vice versa. This was not far from the town of Coventry, Vermont, and running through this area lies Interstate 91, the primary north-south road. It'll take you up to Canada or down to Connecticut. As it was the main road that leads through the area and it leads to another country, you know, Border Patrol were out in force in this area, checking who's coming and who was going to make sure that everybody there and passing through there, you know, was meant to be there, had visas and so on and so forth. Working that day was 44-year-old David Malland, though he went by his middle name of Chris. He was from Minnesota, an Air Force veteran, engaged to be married, and had worked Border Patrol for the last 15 years. He was parked up along the southbound lane, watching all the vehicles passing through. A lot of them probably just, crossed the border from Canada into the United States only minutes prior. At 3:15 though, one car in particular, it caught his eye. It was a 2015 blue Toyota Prius, North Carolina plates. That vehicle had in fact been on the authorities' radar for about a week by this point. It was even observed earlier on that very day. Agent Malland flashed lights and he pulled this Prius over, and a couple of more, law enforcement vehicles arrived soon after to just kind of get around this car and make sure it's all good to go. See, two people inside this Prius had come to the authorities' attention earlier on after the employees at a hotel they'd been staying at expressed concern. They'd been wearing tactical gear, were armed, and so, well, this person called authorities and said, make sure to keep an eye on them. And so they had. Now, finally, Agent Malland was pulling them over for what appeared to be a routine traffic stop. But minutes after agents walked over to that pulled up Prius, shots rang out.
Oh.
Shots fired by those inside. Shots fired by a woman opening up on the agents surrounding her Prius. Seconds later, Agent Malland lay in the cold snow. One of the suspects lay dead inside that Prius, and the other lay also in the snow outside, injured and shot. Chris Malland, he was rushed to hospital, but tragically, 45 minutes after he pulled over that Toyota Prius at 4 p.m., he was pronounced dead.
Damn.
Breaking news tonight in Vermont. A Border Patrol agent has been shot and killed near the Canadian border on I-91 in Coventry. The FBI says one suspect was also killed, another was wounded. Officials insist there's no threat to the public. Parts of the highway will remain closed, though, during the investigation.
Man, rest in peace to that officer, but I just feel like these two individuals, they already had said to themselves, if we ever get pulled over by the police, they ain't taking us alive. You know what I'm saying? If we ever get pulled over or ever end up getting caught, we gonna shoot before we surrender. And that's what they end up doing.
The two assailants who had been inside that car would be named as 21-year-old Teresa Youngblood from Seattle and 28-year-old Ophelia Bockholt from Germany. Ophelia was a transgender woman to Carola and Johannes. Ophelia had worked as a quantitative trader at Tower Research Capital in New York City, which basically means they implemented models using mathematics to find good trades, investments, that sort of thing. It's very numbers heavy, algorithmy, mathematically equation-y, the mind boggles, frankly, folks. And the mind would also boggle at the salary she was on in that firm in New York City. But that's what she did, and she was pretty good at it. However, come this incident, January 2025, Ophelia hadn't worked there for quite some time. It's believed she actually quit that job in the October of 2023. Due to her quitting that job and her actually being from Germany, her visa, a H-1B visa, had actually expired also. So that was one of the reasons the Border Patrol were kind of like, Ophelia was the person killed in the shootout with the police. Teresa was from Washington State and had attended an elite private school there, had studied computer science, and was in fact engaged to be married. Her fiancé was a man named Max Snyder. They'd gone to school together, and much like Ophelia and Teresa, he too studied computers. At the time of this shootout, though, in northern Vermont, January 2025, Max, where was he, I hear you ask? He was in California. In jail in California.
Wow.
In jail for what? Murder.
Wow.
The very same thing Teresa herself would now be in jail for in Vermont. Hundreds would turn up to Chris Malland's funeral, and he was finally laid to rest in Fort Snelling National Cemetery with full military honors. But the insanity of this story, it's only just beginning. See, the people involved, Ophelia and Teresa, and even Teresa's fiancé, Max Snyder, friends and family would say they had all been acting different of late. Personality changes, stark ones, secret phones, mysterious trips. Ophelia had quit her job as a quantitative trader in October of 2023 and then vanished. Teresa had been reported missing by her parents in May of 2024. These three people, Max, Teresa, and Ophelia, they were all linked together by a cult. The Zizian cult, what's been called by those that knew them as a death cult, if you can believe that. Look at you. Alright, so I hear you're barking, big dog. You know, you're probably wondering, what the heck is a Zizian, right? Where are we going with this? Well, it's a strange, you probably got that already, intellectual group of, you got mathematicians, intellectuals, some of whom worked at NASA, Google, high-tech shit, research institutes, a lot of them with artificial intelligence, and it's been linked to at least 6 deaths across the United States. That deadly shootout in Vermont, a double homicide of concerned parents in Pennsylvania, and 2 brutal attacks on the same landlord in California. And it all began with Jack Amadeus Ziz Lasota, the head of this Zizian cult. Yeah.
Did I just hear that correctly? Did Mike just say that some of these people have been linked with like jobs like NASA and Google and ish? That's taking this cult to a whole nother level, Bean Team. Let's go.
Ziz, as Jack Lasota goes, transgender, was from Alaska, born in 1991, and studied computer science, if you can believe that. Computers, again. Ziz, you know, was described as a hacker. From her very earliest years, always kind of struggled, sort of socially, would have these big outbursts. But when they were in like high school, they were able to hack their school's computer system to get like payroll information and all this kind of stuff. Ziz's own father had worked with AI, so it seemed to be kind of the family business. And Ziz would go and intern at NASA. Then Ziz moved to the Bay Area for the tech industry, though Ziz's time in the area doesn't seem to have gone too well. Ziz at this time ran a blog titled Sinceriously. It's very much an engineer's or a very technical person's mind viewing the world. Everything is flowcharts, hacking, statements, true or false, extrapolations. A lot of people involved in this group are neurodivergent. You know, you can tell it's a computer nerd trying to write philosophy, because that's exactly how it reads. It's full of very technical, uneloquent language that constantly references nerdy pop culture, that unless you have the same one-track mind, it'll largely come off as unintelligible. See, Ziz at this time was drawn to the rationalist subculture, which was a community that sprung up in Silicon Valley around, you know, computers and the early internet since around like the early 2000s. Basically, it's a group, it's a community of people who think, you know, very rationally about the issues modern technology, computers, artificial intelligence, all the issues that raises, and to think in how can we solve these problems rationally. Altruism. How can we use technology to, you know, make the world a better place for everybody, to solve all these existential issues? Transhumanism, you know, can we make robots out of ourselves? Make ourselves like, you know, upload your mind to... It's all very cyberpunky kind of type stuff. And much of it also has to do with, you know, as you can imagine, artificial intelligence, probably the most like complex issue where the world is facing, you know, these days. Will AI keep growing, eventually turn into Skynet and kill us all? Here's hoping. So rationalists are simply a community who are interested in these type of topics, which are pretty interesting. But Ziz will take on this to the next level, and then some. Ziz began to live on a boat, was trans and vegan, and was unsuccessfully trying to break into Silicon Valley, and things weren't going great for her around the year 2017. Ziz's blog, Sinceriously, really starts to get more bizarre and darker as time went by. Ziz had been living on a boat for about 5 months, couldn't get a job, became more and more obsessed with rationalism and working on computers all day, and kind of started to view people as less than people, more like things. Soon Ziz would meet another person, a Gwen Danielson, who would join Ziz on the rationalist fleet they were building. Gwen believed that people, that's you and me, with multiple personalities inside our head, and you can activate these multiple personalities by switching different hemispheres in your brain. You might have one personality on this side, another personality on the other side. They could be so different, they could be different genders, you know, and if you can set one hemisphere of your brain to sleep, you can activate the other personality. Who knows? So they were starting this rationalist fleet in the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, one of the main reasons was they couldn't afford rent, because it's a joke there. So they were like, hey, come on, we'll go live on this boat. We can spend all our time clackety-clacky and doing computer things. And I mean, they only had one boat at the time, but so I'm not sure if that qualifies as a fleet. But humble beginnings and all that. You know, maybe this will keep growing and growing. So the rationalist community very big in Silicon Valley, and both Ziz and Gwen would become well known in it, or I guess I should say infamous in it.
It's just crazy, man, that the chances of two freaking Looney Tune type people, you know, out of their mind type thinking people, thinking about shutting off this side of your brain and all that crazy stuff Mike was just saying. For two people to be thinking like that and they meet up together, that is a dangerous combination, being team, where you got two wackos on your hand at the same time. And it seems like they gonna recruit some freaking more. This is just the start.
Let me read you a brief snippet from Ziz's blog so you can kind of get an idea of what was going on up here. I described how in Rationalist Fleet, me and Gwen ended up doing all the important work, most of the object level labor. But what mattered most was steering, course correction, executive decisions. These decisions could only be made by someone who was aligned as an optimizer, as in their entire brain. How this ultimately required sociopathy, for being unpwned by the external world. They said sociopathy to avoid being pwned was a tough game, miss one piece, and you would be pwned. Everyone would try to pwn you. They said they would try to pwn me. What? Ziz and Gwen had ties to official rationalist groups like the CFAOR, the Center for Applied Rationality, or the MIORI, which is the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, both interested in rationality, the risks of AI, etc, etc. But over time, Ziz started to go like a little bit more extreme. Like sort of an anarchist. She sort of viewed herself as a hero, frankly, as a hero, though those who knew her would say she actually viewed herself as a Sith, like a Sith Lord, like from Star Wars, which rocks, frankly. But Ziz was described as a master manipulator who was extremely skilled at targeting those who were naive and vulnerable, using all sorts of words and phrases that would become integral to the Zizian movement. Single good, non-good, collapsing the timeline, because of course they believed in, multiverses, so, one single decision can burn down an entire timeline. This is exhausting. That you can logic yourself through any situation to always come out on top and never lose, or get pwned, of course, and that you can ignore basic human behavior. They wanted to enforce altruism to all living things via violent means, enforcing veganism. What does all this mean? I have no idea either. It's all sorta that insane cult jargon you see with many of them. You kinda need to be insane to get it. But ultimately, it comes down to enforcing beliefs on others for complete control of them. For example, what did Ziz and the others do to new or prospective members? Cut them off from friends and family, of course. Classic cult behavior with their own jargon and terminology, and you're either with them or against them. And slowly, but surely, targeting those Ziz knew were vulnerable, the group began to grow. A lot of them seem very neckbeardy, to be sure. You can imagine a fair few fedoras were worn, and a katana will pop up at one stage. Maybe even this person was a Zizian. Zizians would believe that, the end justifies the means, so if the means murder, well, so be it. And hey, listen, there's multiverses here. So if we kill them in this timeline, they'll be fine in another one, so don't worry about it, because in that other timeline, you didn't decide to do something bad, so therefore you don't deserve to die. What their actual goals were, though, seems kind of like sorta unclear. Mainly it just seems like they were out there just to exist. Though maybe that also has to do with the fact that Ziz Lasota, their leader, died.
Oh.
Sort of.
Sort of? What you mean by sort of, Mike? Like this whole thing with these Zizzies. I'm gonna call them Zizzies. These people, like, it's hurting my brain, being team, trying to understand their logic. Like Mike said, you sort of gotta be insane your damn self to understand this crazy ish. You know what I'm saying, man? And the one thing about all these cult leaders that they all have in common, some kind of way, being team, they are very convincing, and they get people to drink the Kool-Aid one way or another, whatever tactics they use, keeping you away from your family and your friends, all that. But they just have this knack for being able to just get people to believe in every freaking thing they say. It's crazy, man. But what it might mean she died, but didn't die. Well, sort of. Let's find out.
In 2019, they had protested the Center for Applied Rationality alumni reunion. By this time, Ziz and the group had long been ostracized from normal rationalists. The Zizians all wore black robes and Guy Fawkes masks, protesting this retreat in the northern California woods outside of San Francisco. They surrounded all the entrances and exits and refused to leave. They originally had intended to stop people from attending the venue, but they couldn't even get that right. They messed up and arrived late. So instead, they decided to prevent anyone from leaving, parking a van sideways on this small bridge. The CFA, or Center for Applied Rationality, it's a think tank associated with rationalism. Those Ziz had come to believe they were all corrupted, sex predators, scandalous, discriminatory, all that. At the scene was Ziz, of course. Right hand, Gwen Danielson, was there, along with two other Zizians, Emma Borhanian and Alexander Leatham. Emma and Alexander, of course, being top Zizian lieutenants by this point. This led to a bit of a standoff as the police believed these Zizians were armed and SWAT teams were called. This all became minor news at the time. The Zizians were all arrested and faced multiple charges, and they in turn accused the police of anti-trans discrimination. Though this seemed like a minor incident at the time, it would lead the Zizians off the cliff. Soon after, the Zizians, they decided, okay, we're done with the rationalist flute. That ain't working out too well. It's back to dry land we go. So they all moved into these RVs on land owned by a man named Curtis Lind. And so the Zizian fleet. Remember, it was pretty much made up of one boat called the Caleb that would be abandoned and sunk in Half Moon Bay. And so the next chapter in this bizarre tale of these vegan Sith Zizians began, and things would get very violent very soon. Curtis Lind was not part of the cult, but he was friendly with some of the members, and he met them down at the docks. He was interested in boats himself. And so he said, you can move into RVs here on my land, I'll give you a good deal. This was in Vallejo, California. The 80-year-old wasn't doing this out of the kindness of his heart. They were renting, but it was cheaper than what others would charge. He had envisioned that this would be a place for artists and so on. He was a patron of the arts. These were not artists he was inviting. While living there, the Zizians were going through some legal difficulties, owing to the protest and arrests at the CFA or retreat. That protest had not only made them infamous, it would be the catalyst for a lot of what was to come. And they were really not making it easier for themselves by flat out refusing to hire any attorneys who were not vegan.
What?
It's really not going great for anybody at this point, is it? However, then over time, things would get worse because relations between the Zizians and Curtis Lind, they would start to get awkward, a little bit tense. See, they would move into Curtis Lind's land and then the pandemic would hit. California, then, the state would mandate banning all evictions. You're not allowed to evict anybody. So the Zizians were like, well, he can't evict us because the state says he can't, so how about we just stop paying rent then? What's he gonna do? And so things became tense. Curtis filed to evict them. The Zizians started carrying around knives in full view of Curtis. Curtis got a gun. Then on August 19th, 2022, Ziv died in a boating accident. Allegedly, Ziz was out there on a sailboat in the San Francisco Bay, and she fell into the water at night. The Coast Guard were even called. Searches were done for hours, but Ziz's body was never recovered. Jack Amadeus Lasota left our lives, but not our hearts, on August 19th after a boating accident. Loving adventure, friends and family, music, blueberries, biking, computer games and animals, you are missed. Here's one message of condolence. Jack, you are one of this age's visionary philosophers. Reading your work was a privilege, and I have every hope your manuscripts will continue to shape the world of rationality for years to come. A life cut too short. The world is unquestionably smaller now. So now, no lawsuit for Ziz, and Gwen Danielson, right hand gal, she would disappear herself soon after. Both Ziz and Gwen, they actually had active arrest warrants out for them since April of 2022. So them just having to disappear and or die made sense, Why not at this point? Gwen Danielson, in fact, would fake her own death according to her lawyer, who, oh, why is Gwen not turning up to court? I think she's dead. Though she would be spotted by numerous people hanging out at that trailer park after she died. Maybe it's a ghost. So now, back to the Zizian trailer park, with, allegedly, both the number 1 Ziz and number 2 Gwen. Allegedly, they're both dead, wink wink. Things still continued on Curtis Lynn's land, and the Zizians, by this stage, they numbered over 20 people.
Damn.
They would eventually reach a very explosive boiling point. By this stage, even the locals were describing them as a cult, witnessing them, walking around naked, wearing gas masks all the time, carrying weapons and such. They were like kind of becoming infamous in this area as like the local weirdos, stay away from them. And they were basically in there working on computers, clackety, on AI, on things, quantitative stuff, folks, quantitative stuff in these trailers all day. Solar powered shit above the trailers, but not for long. What happened that day in November 2022 is unclear. Curtis Lind says that although tensions were pretty high between himself and the Zizians he was trying to kick out, this particular day they had asked him to come down to the land to fix a water leak. They had a problem with the water, so Curtis says, alright, I'll come down, I'll fix it for you. There's two sides to this story about what really happened. The Zizian said he came down and was threatening them with a firearm. Curtis says he went down there to fix the water link and suddenly they started laying into him, attacking him with a katana. He says at one point he just looked down, the sword was sticking through his body. He had been stabbed with a katana and he would actually lose a peeper. One of his eyes would be cut out from the blade. They studied the blade. Curtis then whipped out his gun, shooting 2 people. Alexander Lethem, injuring, Emma Borhanian, killing. Curtis the fella still with a sword sticking out of him. He managed to go to a nearby neighbors for help, was airlifted to a hospital. He was lucky to be alive. Curtis Lind.
Now, whose story should we believe right there, being team? I'm sorry, long story short, story long, I believe Curtis, man. Like, these people, it's crazy that they got up to 20 of them in this group at this point, y'all. And if I was like, if these people was in my freaking neighborhood, I have to move. Like, seriously, man, I wouldn't even want to live around no damn group of people like that. They're just walking around freaking naked with gas mask on and ish. Like, I'll be thinking not only are they crazy, but this is potentially can be some dangerous ish too. And now we starting to see the danger. Let's keep going. Good video.
And would require 1 month of hospitalization for his injuries, which included approximately 50 puncture wounds, the loss of his right eye, a sword wound through his chest, and facial lacerations. Emma Borhanian died at the scene.
Patrick McMillan shows us how he found his landlord early Sunday morning, crouching over, bleeding, with a samurai sword through his chest.
He banged on my door and I woke up and came out. And he said, I'm dying, and he had blood squirting out of him and that sword sticking through him.
McMillan says his 80-year-old landlord, Kurt Lind, had been brutally attacked by other tenants of the Vallejo property, who Lind was in the process of evicting because they hadn't paid rent in years.
They've been here for 3 years and they wouldn't leave, and it's taken him a long time to get into court and get, an eviction notice on him. They found out about the eviction notice. They figured, I guess, if they killed him that he couldn't be evicted.
But McMillan says Lind had a gun and shot 2 of his attackers.
There was one that was shot dead and the other had 3 bullets in her.
This whole thing is just, it's bizarre. It's like it doesn't feel real.
Carl Lind can't believe what his father has endured. He says the tenants had basically taken over the property and taken advantage of his father's generosity.
And he just wanted this as a place to let artists or woodworkers or electricians be able to come and live in a trailer, and then have a little container next to it where they could do work and put their tools and have a safe place.
I've known him for 15 years, and he will help anybody, and he is always getting taken advantage of, these people that he helps. He just doesn't understand that no good deed goes unpunished.
Kurt Lind is recovering from multiple stab wounds, and his family says he may lose an eye. Police say 2 people are now in custody on murder charges.
Prosecutors would side with Curtis Lind, and the injured Alexander Leatham and another Zizian, a Surrey Dow, they would be charged with Emma Borhanian's murder. Over the next few years, while in jail awaiting trial, they would both try to escape multiple times. See, the prosecutors said that Curtis Lind was acting in self-defense, and even though he pulled the trigger that killed Emma Borhanian, she would never have been killed if the Zizians hadn't attacked Curtis Lind, so therefore the Zizians are responsible for her death. They were then charged with attempted murder, and a search of the property after the attack would uncover some weird shit in the trailers there. I'm talking used surgical equipment. What the hell were they doing to each other? I don't want to know.
What
like a dozen laptops, all sorts of expensive computer equipment. Who really knows what they were doing on that property? The mind boggles, and the attacks linked to the Zizians would only get darker.
Shit, goddamn, oh Mike, how much darker we gonna get, man? Just the fact. I just look at those pictures of that old man laying in that hospital bed, like, who in their right mind could beat up an old person like that? And who could beat up anybody like that? But I'm just saying, an 80-year-old dude, and y'all the reason he laying in the hospital like that. I'm glad he freaking survived, though. And yes, I feel like the other one should be charged with the murder of the one who actually died, because y'all the ones who caused all this ish. Crazy. Let's go, y'all. Mike said it's about to get even darker.
After this incident, it appears many of the Zizians went their separate ways, though remained connected online, and a number would reappear in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So now let's go to late December 2022, 1 month after the attack on Curtis Lind in Vallejo. The Zizians' leader, Jack Ziz Losota, is believed to be dead, into the drink at the bottom of the San Francisco Bay, but that hasn't stopped the Zizians, who are still going from strength to strength. The numbers only seem to be growing. Except there's now 1 dead, Emma Borhanian, and 2 are in police custody charged with her death, Alexander Leatham and a Surrey Dow. It wouldn't be long before they struck again, this time minutes before midnight, New Year's Eve. It was a cold winter in Chester Heights, a wealthy suburb of Philadelphia, when Richard and Rita Zajko let 2 people into their home at around 11:30 p.m. on December 31st, 2022. Less than 2 minutes later, screams were heard coming from their home. Some shouting, "Mom!" and "Oh my God!" Lights in the house would flicker, and the 2 people then left the Zajko home. The bodies of Richard and Rita wouldn't be discovered for days until a welfare check was requested, and ultimately, they were both located in the bedroom of their own home, having both been shot in the head.
Pennsylvania State Police are investigating the deaths of Richard and Rita Zajko in Chester Heights. The Delaware County Medical Examiner ruled their deaths a homicide.
It's shocking. It's something that you wouldn't imagine even happening here.
State police say they were called to the home on Highland Drive for a welfare check on Monday. They say the Zajkos were both found inside the home. Neighbors can't believe what happened on their quiet block.
A brutal double homicide of these 2 normal, happy neighbors. They owned numerous properties in the area and were well liked by all their tenants. One person saying about Richard, "He was a great guy, great landlord, great person all round. The wife was an amazing person as well." Police began canvassing the entire neighborhood, questioning their many tenants as they owned numerous apartments, but it was all coming up short who would commit this double homicide, and the police announced they didn't believe this to be a random act of violence. Soon, the couple's daughter and only child was tracked down, her name being Michelle Zajko. She was well educated and had worked around the country. Michelle was 30 years old at the time and a high flyer. She had a master's degree in bioinformatics from Temple University, had worked for NASA, and was currently working as a researcher at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. When questioned as to her whereabouts when her parents were murdered, she said she was at a property she owned in Vermont. She wasn't charged with the murder of her parents, though she had purchased, in the months leading up, a firearm of the very same type that had killed them. She was considered a person of interest, and as such, She did not benefit from her parents' death due to the Slayer's statute. Her parents had millions, so a likely motive if she was indoctrinated into the Zizian cult. After all, what do these Zizians believe? The end justifies the means, so your parents have to go, sorry. But think of those millions of dollars. We'll get you new parents, suck on that. And guess what? So Michelle Zajko was eventually tracked down about a week after her parents' bodies were discovered brutally. She was tracked down to a hotel in Chester City, Pennsylvania, and who was she staying with in the hotel? It's mad, folks. You'll never believe it. It was Ziz Lasota.
Wow.
Somehow, Ziz returned. Ziz Lasota was found back from the dead, back from the watery grave. She lives still. Turns out Ziz was alive the whole time and just faked her own death. Who thinks up this shit? Stranger than fiction. Ziz was in the hotel room, lying on the floor, completely unresponsive, and had to be carried out. Ziz was in the room with another person, a 24-year-old Daniel Blank. Daniel Blank had been Michelle's roommate for a time, and also provided Michelle's alibi for her parents' murder. He's been described as a simple and gentle person, but easily swayed and manipulated.
No, even if Michelle didn't actually do it herself, she know who did it and she was freaking in on it. I'm sorry. Now that we all know that you effing around with the Zizians, Zizzy, whatever, we know that your ass is freaking you are the reason that your parents are not alive today. You are part of it.
Both Ziz and Daniel Blank were arrested, though Ziz was bailed out after a few months, $50,000, and promptly vanished once again. Michelle Zajko had lived in the Bay Area for a time and was highly educated and had very high-paying, prestigious jobs, and was, of course, a Zizian. We don't know exactly how Michelle and Ziz met. Probably through rationalism, commenting on each other's posts, and then, Ziz was always described as a very manipulative person. So Michelle and her own partner and roommate, a person named Alice Monday, they began to get to know some Zizians. They lived in the Bay Area, just a couple of miles from the, RV park where the Zizian cult lived. They lived there for a while, got really big into it, and then they moved. The two of them, Michelle and Alice, they moved across country to, Coventry, Vermont. Isn't that weird? So did Michelle Zajko kill her parents? We don't know. But about a year before her parents were brutally murdered, Michelle had written this in her blog, because they all have blogs. Ziz informed me that the only way I could gain her trust was to murder Alice, her roommate in Vermont, preferably soon. Ziz helpfully suggested I use a gun with a potato as a makeshift suppressor, and that I might destroy the body with lye, and then told me that after I should video call Ziz and show her the body before I destroyed, so she could get proof positive that I'd really done it. And if I didn't do it, Ziz planned to drive across the entire continental United States to murder me.
Wow. Just crazy as hell that you posting this online for the world to see.
Michelle didn't murder her roommate, but Ziz did drive all the way across the entire continental United States, and then a little over a week after her parents were murdered, Ziz was arrested pretty close by. As I said, neither Michelle nor Ziz were arrested for the actual double homicide, but they were viewed as mighty close to it. It ain't no coincidence. And both Ziz and Michelle, after that, they vanished once again. And so now, in this story, we're getting close to where it all began. January 2025, with the murder of David Malland. Earlier that month, January 2025, a young woman who called herself Connie, real name Teresa Youngblood, called a realtor asking to view a property in Coventry, Vermont. This was an extremely remote cabin deep in these New England woods. What Teresa Azizian was, wanting to do to get a cabin deep in these woods that was near the cabin Michelle Zajko and, the other Azizians had, were they trying to create this little community of compounds deep in their Vermont woods where they could just be Zizians all they wanted? We don't know, but it's kind of looking that way. Were they trying to have this little cult in the forest? Teresa seemed very eager to view this cabin. Of course, herself, her fiancé Max Snyder, and their friend Ophelia Buchholz were all Zizians too. Teresa Youngblood had said goodbye to her mother and moved out of the family's home to live with a friend back in May of 2024. She also changed her phone number. Soon after, being unable to contact her, her parents, they reported her missing. And both of her parents told police that her behavior kind of changed in recent years, and they believed that she was lying about where she was going and who she was seeing. They also said that she had disconnected from childhood friends, and they had become concerned that she was being forced, to act this way. They also guessed that she might be in a controlling relationship. Police told Teresa's parents, though, that because, she was an adult, she was free to make her own decisions. And investigators later determined that there was no reasonable concern for her safety, so no missing persons report was actually created. So where did she go? We still don't really know. Not much is, in fact, known about what the Zizians were doing over 2023 and 2024. However, in November of 2024, Teresa and Max, who had known each other since their private school days, they applied for a marriage license. Though by this stage, Max would, soon be in jail on murder charges. See, also in January of 2025, two of the Zizians, they were getting ready to go on trial in April. This coming April, regarding the murder of Emma Borhenian and the attempted murder of Curtis Lind. They would rather not do that. They would rather not go on trial for those crimes, and the only witness there that day who was not a Zizian was Curtis Lind. This had been something they'd planned since it had originally happened, no doubt. And once again, the end justifies the means, and if, thinking about it rationally, how are we not going to spend our lives in prison? Kill him. Time to collapse the timeline on Curtis Lind. And the Zizian to do it? Max Snyder.
Vallejo police are investigating the city's first homicide of the year. Police say they were called to 3rd and Lemon Streets just after 2:15 this afternoon. Officers say they found one man who had been stabbed. They took that person to the hospital where he later died.
On January 17th, 2025, Max Snyder was seen wearing all black, loitering outside Curtis Lind's home. Curtis seen him. He goes out. What the hell are you doing here? Max then grabbed Curtis Lind and stabbed him multiple times with a very large knife. Curtis dropped like a sack of potatoes. Max walks away before quickly, about facing, walking over to Kurt as he lay on the cold ground, went down to him and slit his throat. To be sure.
Are you fucking kidding me, Bean Team? Man, I thought Kurt was gonna end up surviving this story, y'all. Just the fact that he survived that gruesome beating the first time, then y'all motherfuckers come back and still kill the damn man. Thinking that this gonna like whatever dumbass, coat, stupid, zizzy logic that y'all using over there, y'all whacked out ass brains, the ends before the means before the ends, whatever, my friends. This is freaking crazy, y'all. I did not expect that to happen. Crazy, man. That one kind of caught me by surprise. I know Mike was saying he had ended up murdering somebody, but I wasn't expecting it to be Kurt. Rest in peace to Kurt.
Snyder was arrested and charged with murder. His fiancée was on the opposite side of the country, about to commit a murder of her own.
Facing a murder charge with 2 enhancements. He's accused of lying in wait and killing his 82-year-old Vallejo landlord, Curtis Lind, on January 17th. But investigators say Lind's death was connected to another attack on him back in 2022. Lind's family posted on GoFundMe saying Curtis was the victim of an unprovoked violent attack by 3 young adults on his Vallejo property. He miraculously survived being stabbed multiple times.
Teresa had been traveling with Ophelia, and they'd stayed at a hotel in Vermont. Staff there, becoming concerned with, seeing firearms and tactical gear, were like, well, that's not the normal shit to wear around, and they informed the authorities, who began to trail them. This eventually led to a traffic stop, and to the deaths of Agent Chris Malland and Ophelia Buchholz. Inside their vehicle were hollow point ammunition, gas masks, night vision cameras, and another firearm that once belonged to Michelle Zajko, who may have killed her parents with it. And so, you have 6 deaths associated with the Zizian cult. Emma Borhenian, Rita and Richard Zajko, Curtis Lind, David Malland, and Ophelia Bockholt. Max Snyder has been charged with Curtis Lind's murder, Teresa Youngblood's been charged with David Malland's murder, and 2 of the Zizians are currently in jail for the attempted murder of Curtis Lind and the actual murder of Emma Borhenian. Who knows if now that Curtis Lind is dead, who knows if, what will happen at that trial? Maybe they will even walk free. And nobody is quite sure who murdered Richard and Rita Zajko, though we can hazard a guess. Police then began a nationwide search for Michelle Zajko, and of course the Zizians' leader, Ziz Lasota. As I said, this case is insane in every conceivable way. Who knows how big the Zizian cult is at this stage? It's probably, you'll find some people out there who'd be only mad to join. Scratch that. Not all of them are actually still out there. On February 16th, 2025, both Ziz Lasota and Michelle Zajko were arrested in Allegheny County, Maryland. Arrested alongside those 2 was also Danielle Blank, who, if you remember, was arrested with them both previously, not long after the Zajko double homicide. So all 3 of them stuck together since, it seems. They were all linked to some property in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where it seems the Zizian cult moved to after it had to leave Curtis Lind's land in California. The 3 suspects, Ziz Lasota, Michelle Zajko, and Danielle Blank, face multiple charges, including trespassing, obstruction of justice, and possession of a handgun in their vehicle. Allegedly, they were arrested after trying to camp in a white van on private property in Allegheny County. The property owner saw their van, told them to get the hell out of here. They didn't. So the owner called the cops, and when the police showed up, they found all 3 of them in that van with plenty of firearms, handguns, rifles, and ammunition. And so that
I just hope all their ass stay locked up.
Takes us to the story of this vegan, genius, trans death cult. Up to now, that's the only adjectives like the news media that I've been reading about has been using to describe the Zizians. There's probably a hell of a lot more adjectives you could use to describe them. Biggest one, batshit insane and pretty murderous. It's a lot to wrap your head around. That's why I actually wanted to cover this story, because I was reading into it and I began following it, and I couldn't even wrap my head around the timeline and what was happening and who the major players were. So that's kind of why I decided to make this video. Hopefully it made the story a little bit easier for you to follow. And this is kind of like just a concise version. You can really get into the weeds here on this story. If you want to read more, just check out the sources down below in the description, because I can only imagine the more insane things that are going to come out about the Zizian death cult. Although it'll be hard to top the insanity we've already had. As Ziz would say, probably should collapse this timeline.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. Truly means a lot to me that you're here watching this whole video. I'll never be able to thank you guys enough for the support, and I hope you enjoyed the videos to come. Right, if you're looking for some cool ass That Chapter merch, check it out down below. It's rocking, I gotta say. If I do say so myself, you can check it out down below. Or check out the That Chapter podcast, where this week we're talking about the Hex Hollow murder, which is a really, really good story. Next week we're talking about, what's up next week? Oh, the story of John List, highly requested case. Or we recently did Alan Leger, and we also did Carl Panzeram. And we're going to be talking about more murders, crazy stuff. So please check out the That Chapter podcast if you're looking for a little bit more. But until the next old video, which will be out when it's out, please take care of each other and please take care of yourselves. Because I love you. Mike out.
It is always a delight when we get to go back to Mike Bean, team. This was a great story from Mike, man. I got so many different takeaways from it, y'all. Like, first and foremost, I'm just glad that all the main leaders, the Ziz and her close lieutenants and sergeants and friends, you know what I'm saying? All them that we know of locked up, you know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, some of them even passed away. But like, even with me saying that, there is a possibility that it's still some more out there, Bean Team. And ain't no telling what the freak they got going on, man. But it is hopefully a possibility with, like I said, the main people being locked up or whatever. That was the end of it. Maybe the ZZ coat is through. Maybe. Hopefully. And like Mike was saying, y'all, like, and I was saying it earlier too, like, this one of the ones where it's hard to even wrap your head around all the craziness that's going on in this freaking story from so many different people doing craziness. All these people was freaking crazy and didn't give a F about murder. Just long story short, story long. None of them cared about that at all. They believed in different timelines and all this. Just because we kill them in this timeline, it don't mean they ain't dead in that one. God damn it, like Mike said at the end, man, I wish we could collapse y'all out of this timeline ourselves. I wish that y'all never would have freaking, the ZZ coat would have never existed. How about that? Can I snap my fingers and make that shit go away? Like, seriously, big team. Michelle, man, I feel like if she didn't do it herself, she know who did it or she was involved with it as far as killing her parents, man. And it's crazy that how long she got away with that is. Now she locked up, but she not even locked up. She not even charged with that. She charged with some crazy ish her and Zizzy and the other person was doing. Like, it's just crazy, y'all. Man, this was and like, I'm sure, like Mike said, it's a lot more ish about this story. If you start reading into it, you can really go down a crazy freaking rabbit freaking hole. But I digress. I'm gonna go let y'all go, big team. We have been here long enough. I appreciate y'all coming on back as always. And before you leave, just please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and do all that if you ain't did that yet. And remember this: love, peace, and happiness. Stay safe. Don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.